Today's stuff we're going to be learning is Bava Kamma Daf Kuf Zayin. There's a study guide for today, and I'll even use it. I'll share my screen while we're studying together, and it will help you organize what's going on in today's daf. So we saw a number of statements of Rabbi Chiya bar Abba in the name of Rabbi Yochanan in the previous daf, and now we're getting to his third halacha about a to'en ta'anat ganav, one who claims that something was stolen. So we have a person who was asked to watch. Ruth was asked to watch someone's item, and she decides to steal it for herself. So what does she do? She's a shomer chinam. She's doing it without getting paid. So she claims that it was stolen, and she takes an oath about it. And we learned in the psukim, and we'll see them inside right now. We look at the psukim of a shomer chinam. It says in Shemot chapter 22. I'll just translate while I look along in the Hebrew. If somebody gives a friend something to watch, okay, money or vessels, and it is stolen. Okay, so if you find the ganav pays double. If you don't find the ganav, then nikrav balabayit el Elohim. So the person who's watching it goes to the two of them actually go to the court, and the person watching it. Now it's a little hard to understand this next part of the pasuk, which we're going to get to later today. Im lo shalach yado melech re'ehu. It sounds like we're saying you go to the court and say, I didn't do anything wrong. Okay, shalach yado, we'll see, really means I didn't use the item. A shomer chinam is not allowed to use the item. I'll call dvar pesha al shor chamor. And obviously, even though it doesn't really say so, they go to the court and they take an oath that it was stolen. Now, the next pasuk says, on any bad wrongdoing on a shor chamor aseh salma al kol avedah, could be any kind of item that was given to watch, or even any lost item. Asher yomar, which we talked about before. What if you're in to'en ta'anat ganav al avedah? We talked about that part of the pasuk. Asher yomar ki hu zeh, which is a strange wording. Someone will say, this is it. Now, this phrase, Asher Yomar Ki Uzeh, is used as the source for something called modeh b'miktzat. Okay, I'll get back to there in 1 minute. Ad Elohim Yavod Dvar Shneim. We'll come to the court. Asher Yishu Elohim. Someone did something wrong. They get wrong. Judge is wrong by the court. Yishalem Shnayim L'Re'ehu. That person will have to pay the double payment. Okay, now what does it mean? Okay, the double payment is obviously, if Ruth claims the object was stolen and she really was the thief, then she pays like any thief, double payment. The question is, under what circumstances? So the words Asher Yomar Ki Hu Zeh is used to learn this halacha called modeh b'miktzat. Modeh b'miktzat is, okay, let's take the classic case of a loan. I claim you owe me money. You say, I claim I lent you $1,000. You say, you really only lent me $300. Or, you lent me $1,000, but I already gave back $700 and I only owe you $300, or I only owe $500, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. It's called you partially admit and partially deny. In that case, now normally I have to prove that you owe me the money to get money out of you. That's called which means, the burden of proof is on the one who wants to get the money. But in a modeh b'miktzat case, which we're going to learn why soon, I actually am allowed to get money from you if you won't take an oath about it. Basically, the law is, if you're modeh b'miktzat, you must take an oath to say, I already paid you back $700 and I only owe you $300, or I don't know what you're talking about, you only lent me $300 or $500 or whatever it is. If you say that and you take an oath about it, then you're exempt. Otherwise, you have to pay. So now, what we're going to say is, now, the words ki uz asher yomar ki uzeh is smack in the middle of shomer chinam. So comes, now this is the background to our statement. Amar Rabbi Chiya bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, 3 lines from the bottom of Kuf Vav Amud Bet. Hato'en ta'anat ganav v'pikadon, eino chayav ad shichpor b'miktzat v'yodeh b'miktzat. If there's no modeh b'miktzat here, okay, let's say you gave me 3 animals to watch, and I make a claim, oh, you only gave me 2, or 2 were stolen and 1 I still have, or something like that. So I do a to'en ta'anat ganav with partial. I partially admit that, yes, I still owe you 1 of them, but the other 2 were stolen from me. If I do that, then I'll be liable of the kefel payment, okay, the double payment. Otherwise, I don't pay the double payment, because look, it appears in that pasuk with the double payment. Those words, Asher Yomar Ki Hu Zeh, which teaches you modeh b'miktzat. The Rosh goes even so far as to say, I don't even have to take an oath in this case. If I'm, or well, I should say it like this. If I'm not, so what this is saying is, if I'm modeh b'miktzat and I lied about part, but I admitted about part, then I have to pay the double payment. If not, If it's just a regular, what we thought until now, regular toy and tanakadav, I took an oath, I said, no way, it was stolen from me, I don't have it anymore, and I really lied and I kept it for myself, of course I would have to pay double. This says no, only if there was a modeh b'miktzat element to it, where I admitted to part of what you're claiming. And that's because it appears in the pasuk there. The rush goes even farther, is to say, I don't know, until now also we've learned that a shomer chinam has to take an oath that an object was stolen from them if the object was in fact stolen. So now the rush goes even farther to say you don't even have to take an oath if there's no modeh b'miktzat component here. But we'll leave that rush aside. So my timer, so what's his reason? It says it right there in the psukim, and that's the source for modeh b'miktzat. Upliga de Rabbi Chiya bar Yosef, but he disagrees with Rabbi Chiya bar Yosef, who says, what are you talking about? Modeh b'miktzat is not relevant for this kind of case. And what does he say? So how does he explain that it's smack in the middle of the psukim there? To Amar Rabbi Chiya bar Yosef, Eruv parshiyot katuv. This is in the wrong place. Okay, this pasuk is out of place. It really belongs in the section later on in that chapter. We're in verse 7 or 8, and it's in verse, I think it's 22 or 24 of the same chapter. We're in Shemot chapter 22. In the end of the chapter, it says in Kesef Tavet me, if you loan money to someone, and it belongs there. Very strange that this would be, but sometimes that happens. Something is out of place. Okay, now, and it just, right, the logic seems pretty obvious, and we're going to explain it right now. Also, once we understand the logic of modeh b'miktzat, we'll understand why it's not relevant here. I mean, you could just kind of say it makes sense. It wouldn't really be relevant here. Why would it be a relevant factor? So, but here we're going to see why. So now he explains, when it says the word ki hu zeh, this is just explaining the Eruv Parshiot, it was talking about a loan. It wasn't talking about our situation. So now the Gemara is going to ask, what's the difference? Why is milveh any different? As Rabba says, now we're going to get the logic of a modeh b'miktzat claim. Rabba. Why, again, without you having to take an oath, okay, if I claim you owe me money and you claim you don't owe me anything, then if I want to get the money, the burden of proof is on me. But if we think you're lying for some reason, then the burden of proof is going to shift to you. So now why do we think you're lying? Well, I'm a rabbi. Why is a modeh b'miktzat force the person, if you admit to half, you now need to take an oath, or again, doesn't mean half part. So we're going to build, there's a few principles here. The first is, if I lent you money, I did something that was very helpful to you. You're not going to have the audacity to lie to my face and say, what are you talking about, Michelle? You never loaned me money. You would never say that. Really? You wanted to deny the whole claim because you didn't really want to pay back the loan. But what? Just as we said a second ago, the reason why you didn't deny the whole thing is mishum de'ein adam is panav, because you would never have the audacity to do it. Theoretically, if you would have had the audacity, you would have not denied the whole thing. And then, well, based on this principle, you would never lie to my face. So you really wanted to admit to the whole thing. But what? We're trying to figure out why a person would admit part and not the other part. It could be you're telling the truth, and then great, take an oath and swear about it. But the oath is really supposed to scare you if you're really lying. Because now we're going to say, and if you're really lying and you won't take an oath, then we're going to make you pay. Because we think you're lying. Because again, you might not be lying. So then great, take an oath and tell us you're not lying under oath. But the fact that you're saying half and admitting half and not the whole thing, we think that really you probably originally didn't really want to say you owe me anything. But you didn't have the audacity to do that. So you wanted to then say, I owe you the whole thing. But what was the issue? So why'd you get to this middle position? Well, you thought, well, if I say you're right, I owe you all the money, I'll make you pay right now. And you don't have the money to pay now. So so you figure, I'll just push her off for right now and until I have the money. So I'll just say, I owe you part, I'll give back the part. And then later when I get the money, I'll say, oh yeah, by the way, I do owe you the whole thing. So that's why we suspect that you're lying. And therefore, and that's why the Torah said, you have to take an oath in this case. That's the ki hu zeh. Because we really want to get you to admit the truth. And we know that if we tell you to take an oath and you're really lying, well, then you'll end up just paying back the whole loan because you have no choice because you're not going to lie under oath. So that's the whole thing. We want to just really pull out the truth. Now, again, if you're telling the truth, great, but we have reason to suspect that you're lying. Now, this whole principle, why were we doing this? We want to explain why this is true for a loan and it's not true for a pikadon, for a shomer, for someone who's watching someone's item. Because gabe milvahu di'ikalamei marhachi. By milva, this is all relevant because you wouldn't lie to my face after I did you this really nice thing of giving you money when you needed money. But gabe pikadon, but if you're watching my item for free, okay, Ruth is watching someone's item that someone gave her to watch for free. Ruth is doing the favor to the other person, right? Not the other way around. So Ruth, maze, she'll have no problem lying to their faces because they didn't do anything to help her. She's the one helping them. And therefore, there's no qualms about lying to their face. And therefore, we make them take an oath and then also make them liable for the kefil payment, even if there's no modeh b'miktzat here. Okay, because any kind of claim, I don't owe you, we're already suspect. Okay, so now we're going to start with, and then again, this would explain why this just explains the basic halacha, that when Ruth is watching someone's item for free, and she claims it was stolen, in order to exempt her, we make her take an oath. And then if she lies about that oath, then there'll be the double payment. Okay, but it's really the basic halacha here of why she has to take an oath. And then the oath would be even if it's not modeh b'miktzat. And then obviously the kefil payment will be even if it's not modeh b'miktzat, if she was in fact lying. Tani Rami bar Kamma. Okay, so we have, just to go back, we have two interpretations. We have Rabbi Chiya bar Abba in the name of Rabbi Yochanan on one hand, that the kefil payment is only, and perhaps even the shvua is only when there's a modeh b'miktzat component, to which Rabbi Chiya bar Yosef says, what are you talking about? There's no reason to apply that logic. Yes, it's true. It appears in the verse, which is the strength of Rabbi Yochanan. But he says, no, that verse is really out of order, and it really belongs in the milveh section, and has nothing to do with pikadon. Tani Rami bar Kamma. Rami bar Kamma now brings a braita that's going to support Rabbi Yochanan. Arba'a shomrim, turning out Amud Bet, shlichim kfira b'miktzat b'hoda'a b'miktzat. There's 4 shomrim, which is all we have. We have 4 shomrim. That's it. We'll go through them right now. In order, okay, for either of them, now each of them has a case or a few cases where they're obligated to pay. So now, if in the case where they're obligated to pay, and they have a case where they can, I made the opposite. They have a case where they're exempt. Okay, each of them, a shomer chinam is exempt if it was stolen or lost. A shomer sachar is exempt if it was onus, against his control. The shoel is exempt if it died on account of while it was working. Okay, while the animal was working, it died, or typical use, it died. That's the only case which borrower is actually exempt. Right, a shomer sachar is someone who gets paid to watch. Shomer chinam is someone who does it for free. Okay, so they go up in level. Shomer chinam is the most exempt. The shomer sachar is a little higher, less exempt because they'll be liable for theft. Otherwise, why are you getting paid? But they'll be exempt if it's onus, beyond their control. A shoel, because the shoel gets to use the item, which the shomer chinam and shomer sachar doesn't, and doesn't have to pay anything, okay, which is different from the 4th shomer, which we didn't talk about yet, which is a socher, someone who rents. They get to use the item, but they pay money to use the item. Since the shoel gets all the benefits, then the only case you're going to be exempt is if it died of typical use. Now, like let's say I borrow your car and it was on its last legs and then it died while I was driving it. That's not my fault. The socher, there's a debate which one it's more similar to, a shomer chinam or a shomer sachar. I'm not going to get into that right now, but because they pay money to use it. On the other hand, they do get to use it. So it's a little bit of a debate. Now, what they're saying here is in order to exempt yourself from any of those cases, you have to take an oath. But that oath is only if there's kfira b'miktzat and hoda'a b'miktzat. There has to be, like, let's say there were a number of animals that you had given me to watch, and let's say I'm a shoel, because that's the hardest one to understand. And it's not the hardest, it's just there's a limit to what cases you would take an oath about. So if I say all those animals died I say some of the animals died while I was working them, but some of them I still have, and I can return to you, that's a case of modeh b'miktzat. Okay? You're only going to take an oath if that's the case, but not if you say they all died, machmat malacha, then you wouldn't, okay? Or if there was only one animal and that animal died while it was working. Now, what are these four that need? So we already went through this. Shomer chinam, shoel, nosei sachar, vasocher. Nosei sachar is someone who gets paid. It's the same as a shomer sachar. They're watching it, but while getting paid to watch. And socher is the renter. Amarav, my tamid Rami Barham. So here he says, he takes, right, the to'en tanak ganav, and he takes it, he applies it to all four shomrim, to any of the cases where they would be exempt. Okay, where each one, it's a unique one. Again, we'll get to all this above in Metzia. We'll learn them much more in depth. Who's liable for what things, etc. So Rabbi says, my tamid Rami Barhama, where does he get it from? So shomer chinam, we know where he gets it from. Behedik k'tibe, we already saw that in the psukim, because it says k'tiv be ki hu zeh. Okay, now we're going to go down further on the study guide. And if you look, I brought the psukim in Shemot chapter 22 from verses 6 to verse 14, which is the sections that talk about these three shomrim. There's not four shomrim in the Torah, there's three. The fourth is the socher, which, like I said, we don't know, is it like a shomer chinam, like a shomer sachar, and that's because it doesn't appear in the Torah at all. So verses 6 to 8 are all about the shomer chinam, and those are the psukim that we read, and there it says, Asher Yomar Ki Hu Zeh. So that makes it clear. It's obviously applicable for shomer chinam. Again, the way Rabbi Yochanan understands it, and the way this Braita understands it, not like Rabbi Chiya bar Yosef. No, not like, Rabbi Chiya bar Yosef, who said this has to do nothing to do with shomer chinam. It has to do with loans. But not going with him, we have now. That's shomer chinam. Shomer sachal, okay, one who watches an item for pay. Well, that's the next psukim 9 to 12. Ki yitain isha re'ehu, if someone gives his friend an animal to watch, and all different kinds of animals. Now, animals usually you only watch for money. It never says shomer sachar in the Torah, but it seems pretty clear that that's what it is, because then it says a mate or nishbar, if it breaks or gets taken, or nishbat gets taken into captivity or dies, and that's dying not from use, but not, it's like an ones kind of death, not on account of doing its work like the shoel. But anyway, the shomer sachal, it starts off with the words ki yitain, and the shomer chinam starts off with the words ki yitain. So we make a gzera shava from one to the other. So once we have modeh b'miktzat, it's true for a shomer chinam. We're going to learn from there to the shomer sachar because of the similar language. What about the shoel? Well, the shoel, v'chi yish'al vav mosif al inyan rishon. Okay, the chi yish'al, v'chi yish'al, it starts off. V'eh, that's chapter, verse 13, which is the next verse after shomer sachar finishes. And if somebody asks to borrow something, okay, and then we're going to have that connects it to the previous, which means whatever was true for the previous, or not whatever, but some element that's true in the previous section is going to be true for this. And what element is that? Modeh b'miktzat. And from there we got to 3 out of the 4. Socher, what about the socher, which isn't even mentioned in the Torah? Well, it all depends how you hold about a socher, which we'll see this whole machloket in Bava Metzia. Either you're going to say the socher is like the shomer sachar, or you're going to say it's like a shomer chinam. Either which way, we already proved that shomer chinam or shomer sachar, in order to be obligated the shvua, and then therefore be obligated the kefil payment, if you were lying about it being stolen, you would have to have been modeh b'miktzat, right? Claimed half, okay, or admitted to part, not admitted to the whole thing. And that's how we get it from this Braita. So again, this isn't an agreed upon thing, but it is in the Braita, and it is what they quoted in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Now we're going to go back to Rabbi Chiya bar Yosef, and he's going to make another comment about a to'en tanak ganav. But Amar Rabbi Chiya bar Yosef, to'en tanak ganav b'pikadon. If you're watching someone's item, Ruth is watching someone's item and claims it was stolen, eino chayav ad sheyishlach bo yad. Ruth is not going to be liable, and here it sounds like she's not going to be liable to pay the double payment. Like, let's say she denied the claim, took an oath in court, turns out she was lying. She doesn't pay the double payment for stealing unless she shlach bo yad, unless she used the item before she claims she stole it. Okay? Now, remember, a shomer is not allowed to use the item. Where do we get this from? So let's look again in the psukim. It says in the psukim, here, Pasuk Zayin, verse 7. Again, we're in chapter 22 of Shemot. Im lo yimatzeh ganav, if the ganav is not found, v'nikra ba'al habayit el Elohim, the one who, Ruth, has to go to the court and swear, im lo shalach yado melecha re'ehu. Now, sounds like she has to swear that she didn't touch the item at all. She didn't use the item. Shalach yad usually means she didn't use the item. Now, aren't we talking about that she's just keeping it for herself? Where is, right? So this added section comes to prove that what? So again, my time, right? She basically comes and swears that she didn't touch the item and use it. Michlal, from here, it sounds like that if she had actually used the item, she would be liable. And then, so again, assume Ruth takes an oath. So according to this, she'd have to take an oath, not only that it was stolen from her, but that she didn't use it at all. And then if it turns out that she stole it and used it before she made the claim in court and lied and said it was really hers, Michlal, right? In that case, she'd be liable to pay this double payment. Lememra de b'shalach bayad askina. Okay, so from here we see that since it says you have to take an oath that you didn't touch it, it means that when you have to pay in the next pasuk, al kol dvar pesha, on anything you did wrong, asher yomar ki uzeh, which again, according to Rabbi Chiya bar Yosef, that has nothing to do with anything. They come to the court, asher yishun Elohim yishalem shnayim l'rei, you pay the kefel, only if first you use the item and then you claimed it was stolen, but not if you didn't use the item. Amar lahu Rabbi Chiya bar Abba. Hachi amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Chiya bar Abba comes and says, same one who was quoting Rabbi Yochanan is disagreeing with Rabbi Chiya bar Yosef before, says, what are you talking about? It's talking about if I claim a to'en tanak anav, doesn't need to include this shlichut yad. It doesn't mean I use the item. The animal could be eating by the trench where the animals eat. And I could say, oh yeah, the animal was stolen. I go to court, I take an oath about it. I never touched the animal. I never used the animal. I fed the animal because that was my responsibility. But I didn't, right? That's why I said before, no one would watch someone's animal without getting paid because it's a lot of work to watch an animal. It's not like an inanimate object that just sits on the shelf. You have to dust it maybe, but that's about it. So this animal could have been just doing its own thing. I didn't touch it at all. I didn't, use it for my purposes. And right, again, it's not touching, it's using for my purposes. And of course, I'd be obligated to take an oath. And of course, if I took the oath and lied about it and really stole it for myself, I'd be liable. But doesn't mean I had to have used the item. So now we're going to have two possibilities about what Rabbi Yochanan actually meant by this, because according to the first opinion, it's only if shalach bo yad. According to this, Rabbi Yochanan says it's omedet alavusan. Now, there's two ways you could say this. It's only omedet alavusan, and it's not if you were shalech yad. If you used it, the animal, you wouldn't actually pay the kefel, or and take this oath and all that. Or it's not, or it's even. It's both if you were shalach yad and used it, and if you didn't use the animal. Either which way. So it's unclear what Rabbi Yochanan means, and that's Rabbi Zera's question. Amali Rabbi Zera the Rabbi Chiya bar Abba. Dafka be'omedet alavusan kama. So Rabbi Zera now comes and questions Rabbi Chiya bar Abba, who quoted Rabbi Yochanan. He says, did Rabbi Yochanan mean only if it's omedet alavusan, you didn't use the animal before? And then what would be the logic to say that? Because, now let's review all our halachot about theft. Aval shalach bayad, if I'm watching your object and I'm not allowed to, and I start using it, that's like I'm stealing it. Now, if I'm stealing it at that moment, before I'm to'en tanak anav, then aval shalach bayad kana, ushvu lo mahani beklum. I already, at that moment, I use your item that I'm watching. Let's go back to Ruth. Ruth is watching your item. She uses it. That is an act of gzela. That's theft called gzela. Now, gzela, what happens? Well, she just has to return the stolen item at the value it was at the time. But she's already stolen it and it becomes her object, if you remember, right, for all sorts of issues. So now once she uses it and basically breaks the contract between you, she's really not a shomer anymore. In which case, or shomeret in this case, in which case she basically has to give you back the money. But if she now wants to claim it was stolen, she's already before that obligated to pay you the value. Now, you might not know this, but it doesn't make a difference because the fact is it's her object right now, halachically, because she's used it. Which means, again, it's not really her object. It's just that she owes you the value of it. And then you can't add another kefil payment down the road because she's now you can't even obligate her to take an oath. There is no oath because she'd be swearing about her own object, and it is her object at this point. Again, she still owes you the money for the object. And if she wants to do tshuva, she'd have to add the fifth and bring an asham kseilot. But basically, you wouldn't have kefil in addition to that. And that would be the logic of saying that Rabbi Yochanan meant only when there's no shlichut. What would Rabbi Chiya bar Abba say to this? Yes, that would be in theory true, based on all the laws we've learned until now, but there's a special pasuk in the Torah that says "Im lo shalach yado" in the middle of our section, and it's talking about this issue that you have to take an oath that you didn't use it, which means if you did use it and you lied about it, you're going to have to pay the double payment, right? And you claim it was stolen. You used it, then you claimed it was stolen, and it's still in your house. You'd have to pay the double payment. So he would basically say, yes, it's true. That's what the logic would state, and other laws that we know. But it's called Gzerat HaKatuv. The Torah said so. So the Torah overrides that. That's what you would have to say. And that's what you would say if you go also with the second explanation of Rabbi Yochanan, because this was only option number one. Odilma, or do we say afilu omedet alavusa kamma? Or maybe Rabbi Yochanan saying even if it is, meaning both if it's shlichut, because that's what the pasuk says, and also if you weren't shalach yad, also it would be the case that the pasuk about the shlichut is just adding an addition, but you don't necessarily, it's not a criteria in order to take this oath and for claiming it was stolen, you would take the oath and then pay the kefil if you were actually lying. So that's the question Rabbi Zera asked Rabbi Chiya bar Abba. What did Rabbi Yochanan mean when he said omed alavusa? You don't need shlichut. Did he mean you don't need it, but you could have it and it would be the same, or you wouldn't actually get the kefil, the double payment, if you were sholach yad and you used the item, because then you would have required it at that moment, and then there is no continuation really here. There's no shvua, and if there's no shvua, then there's no kefil. Again, the shvua is the oath. So Amar lo, zu lo shamati, kayotze ba shamati. So when Rabbi Zera asked Rabbi Chiya bar Abba this question, Rabbi Chiya bar Abba said, listen, I didn't hear an answer to that, but I did hear something similar. And maybe we can learn it from here. To Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, a different statement of Rabbi Yochanan that was quoted by Rabbi Asi. Hato'en ta'anat avad v'nishba. So I claimed it was lost, which also I would take an oath about. And then chazar v'ta'an ta'anat ganav v'nishba. And then I claimed that it was stolen, and I took an oath. Ubau edim, and then edim came and showed that it was still in my possession, and I took two oaths here. Patur, I don't pay kefil. Why don't I pay kefil? My timer, because there's only kefil for to'en tanat ganav, not for to'en tanat avad. So since my first claim that I lied about was to'en tanat avad, lav mishum de kana b'shvuah rishona, is it not because I already, right, why do I not pay double? Probably because comes Rabbi Chiya bar Abba and says, I assume that Rabbi Yochanan said this because when I took the first oath, I already acquired the item by claiming it was lost. By taking that oath, it's almost like I gave you something back. I gave you my word, and my word was good. Now, it turns out it wasn't good. But when I give you my word, that's as if I've given it back to you. And again, if I acquire it, in the shvuah rishona, then theoretically, you could say the same thing here. I acquired it when I did shlichut, which means that when I claim tanat ganav later, we can't obligate me for the kefil because it's already mine. To which Amar le, Rabbi Zera says, you can't prove it from there. Lo, that's different. Ho'il v'yatsa yidei ba'alim b'shvuah rishona. It already, once I claim tanat avad, it no longer belonged to the original owner. But if I do shlichut, it's not like it doesn't belong to the original owner. In other words, there was an oath. It's not the same as me just using the item. It's not the same comparison, and therefore you can't learn it from there. Itmar nami, it was also said, now this is not about the question we're asking, but you'll see in a minute. It was also said, Amar Rabbi Avin, Amar Rabbi Ela, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, hato'en tanat avida b'pikado v'nishba, v'chazar v'ta'an tanat geneva v'nishba. This is exactly the case we just saw, the last case. That it was said, Ubau edim patul ho'il v'yatsa yidei ba'alim shvuah rishona. This is a proof that the reason there is because it already left the original owner's possession. As soon as I take an oath and say it was lost, it no longer belongs to the original owner because they got it back, so to speak, by getting my oath. That kind of took the place of the item. Again, it's not exactly fair, especially if I lied, but it's in a certain way, it was as if that oath took the item away from them. Okay, the fact that I claimed it was lost, it's already, they have no thing with me anymore, and therefore the item really becomes mine. Again, it's not really mine. I still have to return it, But now if I claim that it was stolen, I'm not going to have to pay the kefil payment, the double payment, because it's already not theirs. But that wouldn't necessarily prove the same thing about shlichut yad, and therefore we don't really know what Rabbi Yochanan holds. So again, we have Rabbi Chiya bar Yosef, who basically says there has to be shlichut yad in order for me, if I lied under oath that it was stolen, and then turns out I was lying, I won't pay kefil unless I did shlichut yad in the beginning. Rabbi Yochanan either says you won't get the kefil payment, I won't have to pay the double payment unless or Ruth in our case, Ruth won't have to pay that double payment unless she didn't sholach yad. That's one extreme of Rabbi Yochanan. Or could be she'll pay the kefil whether she was sholach yad or whether she wasn't sholach yad. Could be either way. Now we're going to bring in Rav Sheshet. Rav Sheshet holds by the first one I just suggested of Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, the one that he says, only if I wasn't sholach yad, if I didn't touch it, but if I did touch it, I basically acquire the item by touching it. I won't pay kefil for lying later under oath that I stole it. Again, I'll have to still pay back the item, but I won't have to pay the double payment. That's what we're going to see right now in Rav Sheshet. Amar Rav Sheshet, hato'en ta'anat ganav b'pikadon kevan sheshalach bo yad patur. Here you have it. If I claim ta'anat ganav in a pikadon, since I already, if I already used it before, I'm exempt from the kefil. My timer, why is that? Because Kamma Rahmana. Now we're going to have to figure out, right, which I didn't mention before, but it seemed pretty clear that the Pesukim said in Lo Shalach Yadon. We understood it the way Rabbi Chiya bar Yosef said it, which is if I have to take an oath, I didn't. I wasn't Shalach Yad, which means if I did use it, then it would sound like I would have to pay the kefil. So how did this other approach understand it? This is how the pasuk reads. You come to the court to say, right, if you didn't, lo shalach yado. Now, we thought until now it means you come and say, I didn't, right? That, is that. I come to the court, right, nikrav al Elohim, the balabayit goes to the court, lo shalach yado, which really means that they did not use this item. And that's why we thought that the whole oath included that issue. But here he says, no, this whole section is telling you this section will be the case. Im is its usual meaning. If. Now, im could mean lots of things, but here im means if. If you didn't use the item at all, meaning this whole section will be relevant if you did use the item. Okay, that's what we're going to say now. Hashalach yado, if you did, patur. This whole thing, which the next pasuk said, you'll have to pay kefil if you were lying. That's only if you didn't touch the item. Okay, so it's two different ways of reading this pasuk. Rav Nachman tries to question Rav Sheshet's understanding. He says, Rav Nachman, but wait, there are three oaths that we make him say. Shvuah shelo pashati ba. Number one, I didn't do anything, how would you say, negligent, like I didn't leave my door wide open for the thieves to come into the house, okay? Because what am I claiming? That it was stolen. So I say I didn't do anything negligent that allowed the thieves to come take it. Shvuah shelo shalachti bayad, I take an oath that I didn't use the item. And shvuah she'ena b'rashuti, and I take an oath that it's not my possession, meaning somebody stole it. Now, what he's going to say is, there's three oaths here. We're going to compare 2 to 3. Okay, 2 is our case, the middle one. We're going to compare it to 3 and say, well, whatever's true for 3 must be true for 2. Let's see. Now, my lav shvuah shalachti ba yad dumia de shvuah she'ena b'rashuti. It sounds like those two are the same, right? In other words, they're similar. Shalachti yad is going to be very similar to ena b'rashuti. Now, now, if I claim it wasn't in my possession and it was, and I lied about, what do? I pay kefil. That's the classic case. When we find out, it turns out it was in my possession and I lied, I have to pay the double payment. Same thing about a shvuah that I didn't use it. We would assume it's the same thing then. When it turns out I really did use it, I'd be liable, the kefil payment, the double payment. So there we have it. Comes Rav Nachman and knocks out Rav Sheshet. But no, Rav Sheshet answers back, what are you talking about? There's 3 cases in that. What do you mean? There's 3 cases. You can look at the last chart on the page. I'll bring it up. Here. There's 3 things. We tried to say it's like the last one. If you lied about it, you pay kefil. But what if you lie about shvuah shelo pashati ba? Let's say I say, oh yeah, I locked all my doors, everything was protected, and it turns out I left all my doors open and all my windows open, and the thief got in easily and took it. Now, when it turns out I lied, do I have to pay kefil? No, I'm not the robber. I just helped the robber to get in by not being careful. I'm not a robber. I don't have to pay kefil. So when they find out that I really was lying, patormi kefil, I'm obviously exempt from kefil. So therefore, same thing. So basically, what we're going to say is, Rav Nachman can't prove that Rav Sheshet is wrong, because you could either learn from Shein B'Shti, or you could learn from Shelo Pashati Ba. It's not so clear, in which case there's really no question against Rav Sheshet. Now we're going to end with a question of Rami Bar Chama. And this, and actually I'll pull up the study guide because I added something here that is not in the text, but what they're talking about here, this question of Rami Bar Chama is talking about a case. We claim, okay, Ruth claimed that it was stolen. Ba'u edim sheganav. Witnesses came and said, Ruth, it's in your house. We have proof. And they proved her wrong, that she was lying. And then Ruth felt really bad about it, and she came forth and confessed. Now, why is the confession important? Because from the witnesses, she has to pay double payment, because she's to'en tanakana. That we already learned. You have to pay the double payment. When she comes and admits, she has to pay the chomesh, the fifth, and she has to bring an asham gzelo, the korban, and that's for her own atonement purposes. But in this case, it was already stated before, previous stuff, that she's exempt from the chomesh, from the extra payment in this case, because she already paid the kefil. Now, the question is, what element of what happened here is exempting her? And that's his question, and we'll see more tomorrow. Mamon mechayvo kefil potro min hachomesh, o duma shvua hamechayv to kefil potarto min hachomesh. In this case, there was one principle that was stolen, right? Really, she kept it, Ruth kept it, lied about it, got caught, had to pay kefil on it, and now we're not going to make her pay another extra payment of this 25%, right? A fifth, which ends up 25%, on the same object that she already paid kefil on. That's mamon. Is it the mamon, the fact that there's only one principle here? Or is it that there's only one oath? And the kefil, the first kefil is on the oath. So we don't make her pay a chomesh on this false oath she had that she's now admitting to, because we already made her pay kefil on the oath. What's the nafkamina here? The Gemara is going to ask, hey chidami, what would be the case where it's relevant? Obviously, either which way, she's not going to pay the chomesh. What do we care? So now we're going to bring a case, which I'll leave for tomorrow, where basically there's going to be two oaths and one principle. So if it's the principle and the money issue that you can't be chayav twice on one money, then you already paid the kefil, you'd be exempt from the chomesh. If it's on the oath, then there's two oaths here, and one oath you're liable for kefil, and the second oath you're going to be liable the chomesh. So then we'll have a case. You'll see the case tomorrow, and we'll see what, and then we'll figure out if we can get an answer to this question. So quick review of today's stuff. We had a lot of arguments between Rabbi Chiya bar Abba quoting Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Chiya bar Yosef. Right? The first argument is about, is modeh b'miksa just in loans, or is it also in pikadon? Okay, which means that you're not going to be liable an oath in a pikadon case unless you also had modeh b'miksa in there. You admitted to part and denied part. Okay, and then you won't have really the kefil payment. In other words, maybe it's the shvua, even you wouldn't have to take an oath, or maybe it's just the kefil, that if you lied about it, you won't have to pay kefil unless there was a modeh b'miksa in there, and that was a debate between the two of them. Rami Bar Chama brought a proof, or brought a bride to the support of Rabbi Yochanan. Then we went to the next claim, which is, do you need shlichut yad or not? And we had three options, three possibilities. Two of them were within Rabbi Yochanan, and we had Rav Sheshet and Rabbi Chiya bar Yosef on opposite sides of the coin. Whereas Rav Sheshet said, no, you can't have shlichut yad. There will be no kefil if you were sholech yad. We have Rav Chiya bar Yosef said you'll only be chayav kefil if you were sholech bayad. And Rabbi Yochanan, which we weren't sure if he went like Rav Sheshet or he had this middle position, it could be with shlichut yad, it could be without shlichut yad. Okay, and then we went on to question Rav Sheshet. We knocked out the question against him, and then we ended with this question of Rami Bar Chama. And with that, we'll finish for today. Wishing everybody a Shabbat Shalom and Besorot Tovot.